Hi, we're with Josh Parker from Western Digital, Senior Director for Corporate Responsibility. Hi, Josh.
Hello, good morning, good evening.
Good morning, good evening. Yeah, it works for all sides. You're based in California, so it's quite far away. Josh, a word about Western Digital. Let's start with that.
So Western Digital, we're a global data storage solutions provider. We produce a lot of the storage that empowers all of the data processing that's going on right now, both hard drives and flash. So very large and growing company that provides a broad, and in fact, I think the broadest spectrum of storage products to the world. So a real enabler for big data and all of the computing that the world is relying on.
Absolutely. And there's obviously operations in Israel for anyone who doesn't know that. So given that that's what you do, what role can you take in terms of climate change? What's the impact that you think and understand that you can sort of have on climate change as such a sort of burning issues at the moment?
Yeah, we've got, I think, a great role to play. We have a lot of opportunities to help mitigate climate change and move the world in the right direction, both internally because we're a manufacturing company. You know, we do a lot of our own manufacturing. We have a presence globally in Asia, the EU, and the Americas. We also have, as a data storage provider, a lot of opportunity to help facilitate change and to help drive the research, the analysis that's required to identify climate impacts and to identify hotspots to help other companies and help other communities identify how they can make the most impactful changes to mitigate the worst effects of climate change. So both inwardly, making sure that we're managing our footprint well, because we do have significant operations throughout the world, and also an external role to play to facilitate others in achieving their climate goals as well.
Absolutely, and as the role of technology is so huge in the world, that's essential. So, what goals have you set in terms of impact on climate change?
So, our most significant goals so far is we've set science-based targets. We've coordinated with the Sciencebased Target Initiative to commit to reduce our emissions. And we're following the greenhouse gas protocol to track our emissions and report them. And so we've been very transparent for years now on our actual emissions as best we can calculate them. And our commitment right now has two main components: our Scope 1 and Scope 2 greenhouse gas emissions, which is really our operational emissions that we generate ourselves through our business and our electricity consumption. We've committed to reduce those by 42% over 10 years. And what's called our Scope 3 emissions, which is upstream emissions in our supply chain, as well as downstream emissions through use of our products. We've committed to reduce the intensity of emissions through the use phase of our products by 50% over the same time frame, over a 10-year period. And these are very, we think, ambitious, but also climate science aligned targets. And that's really what drove the selection of those targets for us.
And climate aligned or science aligned climate, can you elaborate on that a bit?
Sure. So we follow, and this is the whole idea of the Science-Based Target Initiative, is to take the science behind the Paris Agreement and translate it into goals, both for corporations and governments. And so what we're doing is trying to do our part to get on the trajectory that the climate science shows us we need to be on to avoid the worst effects of climate change. And the Science-Based Targets has adjusted their guidance over the years to align with updates in the science. And the targets that they required used to be a little less strict than they are now. But last year, when we set our targets, they were offering two types. There was a well below 2 degree trajectory target, and then there was a 1.5 degree trajectory alignment. And those refer to the amount of global warming since industrialization. And we presented both of those options to our leadership team last year. And this was a big step for us because we hadn't previously set any significant targets like this, and I wasn't sure how our leadership would respond. And so we were pitching both types of targets, and we're excited to just be setting either of them. But our leadership team said, "This is important. We need to do our part. We need to be aligned with the more strict, the more ambitious standard. We want to commit to reduce our emissions so that we're in line with that more aggressive 1.5-degree target." So that's what we committed to. We selected the more ambitious of the two targets, and that's really what drove that 42% number that we're looking at for our operational emissions.
Very impressive. And 42%, I mean, why 42? I mean, it could be 40 or 50. I mean, obviously, if it's 42, there's some reason behind it, right?
Yeah, and that's really, again, just driven by the science and by the fact that to get to the place where we need to be to contain temperatures at 1.5 degrees, that is what the science drives us to. The data shows that it's a 4.2% annual reduction from your base year. So over 10 years, we selected a 10-year time horizon. That's a 42% total reduction. And that's, we could have gone down to 40, we could have gone up to 50, but 42 for us, we thought was the right approach because it's perfectly aligned with science. It's both, I think, ambitious for us and realistic.
Yeah, and I mean, it makes sense. 4.2 a year, and then you obviously reach that. And what about net zero? We hear quite a lot of companies committing to net zero by 2030. There's some criticism, on the other hand, that some of the commitment is not necessarily sort of real rigorous in terms of achieving that net zero. How do you sort of regard that goal?
Yeah, so this is a problem that sustainability and CSR and ESG programs have right now, trying to maintain credibility because it's a very hot topic. Lots of companies want to portray themselves as being very responsible and sustainable, which is great that we've got that goal. But you see this from the new regulations being considered around disclosures in the EU and in the United States and elsewhere about how important it is that when companies make claims, they're very accurate and they're held to account for what they say. So net zero is an absolutely an ambition that we should have, we should strive towards. But the position Western Digital has taken is we want to wait until we actually have a plan and a clear path to achieve net zero before we make an official commitment. We're working towards that. We're moving in that direction with our science-based target. And as soon as we have a line of sight to net zero and are able to say, yes, we can achieve this, and here's what the business impact will be, here's how we get there, we're holding off. And in the meantime, we're actually trying to drive the change that will enable that. And that's a part of our existing targets as well, because we have such a diverse geographic footprint and some of the locations where we have operations, there isn't great access currently to renewable energy. So part of our plan to get not only to our science-based targets to the 42%, but to go beyond that is to help actually improve the availability of renewable energy, not just for Western Digital, but for the communities as well where we operate.
Excellent. And I would definitely go with your approach. I think that, it's very sort of inviting to commit to net zero, but it's at the same time not necessarily that trustworthy if you're really in sort of the business of doing that. So it's I would even say that it's the braver thing to do to our goal, but to be very certain that you can actually achieve that. So just to wrap up, obviously, there's always an interest to hear about the impact of the operation in Israel and the role that the operation in Israel can take in this important road. So anything interesting to share in that regard?
Absolutely. So our company, based on the products that we sell and the type of business that we have, we calculate, and we went through a detailed Scope 3 inventory this year to try to determine, our broader emissions impact, both direct and indirect. And our footprint is really driven by those indirect emissions, partially in our supply chain, but even more so in our downstream usage. So when our customers buy our hard drives, when they buy our SSDs and our other flash products and are using those, the energy that's required to operate them is really what drives the majority of our emissions footprint. So for us to have our biggest impact on reducing emissions and reducing our footprint, we need to focus very heavily on improving the efficiency of our products and reducing the operational energy of our products. And the development and the engineering teams that we have in Israel are really critical to helping us design those advanced systems and processing methods that will allow us to improve efficiency of our products and reduce that very significant category of our footprint in the use phase emissions of our products. So Israel plays a vital role in that very significant category for us.
Wow, that's very nice to hear, and I absolutely agree that this is one of the most essential parts of mitigating climate change. So Josh, thank you very much for being here with us today and sharing what you do.
My pleasure. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak, and we really value Maala, the good work that you do in Israel, a very well-regarded organization, and we appreciate the work that you do. Thank you very much.